You're listening to the Slavic Literature Pod, your shelf help guide to all things Slavic. I'm Cameron Lalana.
And I'm Matt Gerasimovich.
And today we are covering Part 1, Chapter 15 of Vasily Grossman's Life and Fate, and finally coming to the life portion. There's no the peace portion of Life and Fate's War and Peace. Returning to the Shaposhnikov family, if you were here from our Stalingrad series, or meeting some of them for the first time, meeting a section of the Shaposhnikov family, including Ludmila and her husband Victor, as well as Ludmila's two children, as they are now living in Kazan after having been evacuated from they live in Moscow, but I believe they were in Stalingrad at the time. They're evacuated from Stalingrad to Kazan and Stalingrad. And so we join them as they're now trying to make their day-to-day work. And we begin with Ludmila thinking about the fact that she's not heard from Tolya in a while. And is there anywhere you wanted to start with this piece?
Like you said, it's kind of like War and Peace if you don't think about it too much. I guess Grossman could have called this War and Peace as well and done his own full, real, true rewriting of it. But of course, this is not possible because nobody can pretend there's really any peace. The peace and both and everything we've read, the only semblance of peace that there is just these sort of maybe small little moments here and there that people can grapple with. But there is nothing that can be compared to the peace parts of War and Peace. I mean, you can compare them, but they're not similar, is kind of what I'm getting at. And that, of course, casts everything into a completely different light for this chapter. But that being said, we still have just as confusing and mangled of family relation that Grossman gives us, which is great.
And so on one level, one thing I do appreciate about that, the intimacy of this family life. And I think this is just, we've talked a lot about Grossman being a good writer of characters, but he's also a good writer of relationships. And I think just starting in Stalingrad and continuing here, seeing the way that Grossman writes Victor and Ludmila's relationship is so poignant in the ways, like, as we go through Ludmila's introduction here, and she's talking about all the things that she notices about, her husband and everything from his most grand moments of poetry and, bravery, and his worst moments, or even just his most boring moments. And it's just an effective, moving piece of storytelling, which will continue to grow in interest for us as their storyline plays out, and also as Grossman puts more of his own life into well, we'll get there.
I think that the way it sort of works, because a lot of people in our Discord today made a similar comment, now that we're on the, I don't know what you call it, domestic side of the book, or we're on a domestic side of the book.
Right.
The way
the home front,
that,
so to speak.
Yeah. Just the way that the relationships are written, it's very hard to write a convincing relationship where you're sort of dropped in the middle of it, yet you feel as if you have been there the whole relationship. The sort of things that Grossman points out are so specific that you would really have to be with someone for a long time to kind of notice that. The way that these characters kind of study and examine each other, and the way that they know just what buttons to push, and just how to cut each other down if they need, is just really amazing. And also, let's not forget about the fact that Victor and Ludmila sent Nadia to communal farm for the summer. I laughed at that. I put W next to that. That was hilarious. I forgot that was a plot point before, and that actually gave me some good audible laughter during this reread.
Right. And I also want to bring in something I thought from a Discord user, Leia, here, who says, obviously, as we've been talking about here, we compare Grossman to Tolstoy all the time, but someone in here mentioned Austen at some point in something else, and I couldn't help but think of her while reading chapter 15. Her ability to write clearly and incisively about her section of the world is part of what makes her work timeless. Here, Grossman shows just how impactful it can be to write domestic life as well. It's a short chapter, but we get an exact picture of the dynamic between Ludmila's branch of the family. Her intimate knowledge of Victor almost made me cry, and then in parentheses, damn you, Grossman. She's not sentimental about how intimately she knows him, but the fact that she knows how angry he is about his mother's death, that he partially blames her for it, and no one is saying anything is so spot on.
it reminds me of the point yesterday when we were talking about how how sort of resentment can build in unspoken moments, and where you have these chances to get at things and you don't, and it sort of ices over forever because that moment is gone. Yet that feeling of resentment can still be there. I don't think the two yesterday were necessarily building resentment, but you could see how it might work in a similar way. And this is years building.
Right. And yeah, good that you mentioned that through line because that's kind of the character of the other comment which I wanted to bring today, which is from Discord user Daniel, who says, beginning this chapter with, again, there was no letter from Tolia. There is an obvious through line with chapter 14. And as I think back now, a consistent theme of the book so far, the physical and social absent brought about by the war. So another through line you could see here is the ways in which people are just apart from each other, right? You've got the Eroskin's entire inspection of this front line all the time thinking, or, apparently the thing on the front of his mind, the fact that he has not yet heard from his wife or child who are evacuating. Just everyone is missing someone in this war, even if it's not to battle, even if it's just they evacuated somewhere. There are no mail lines, or I thought there were mail lines, but nothing's coming through, whatever the case is. Just the place of people who expect to be there who are not.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big theme of the book overall. I had one thing that I wanted to mark because we are approaching a tough day among our households when we get to it in a few days, but there's another sprinkling of sort of starting to dissect what it means to be Jewish in the Soviet Union, and Grossman, or the narrator through Victor, who is largely considered a stand-in, at times for Grossman, says this. He thought incessantly about his mother, and he thought about something he would have never thought about but for fascism, the fact that he and his mother were Jews. And this is something that is going to come up again and again and again and again. And it's he sort of, slips it in the middle of this chapter where it's not something that's necessarily important, except for in this context, it becomes extremely important. And I'm not saying this was necessarily, the Jewish experience at this time, that people didn't think about it at all. But I would say it definitely became more pressing for sure around this time. And Grossman reflecting on that is kind of a good encapsulation of that. And we're getting to, there's just going to be a lot of discussion on this throughout the book. And so it's good to kind of highlight how his characters are starting to think about that and considering themselves as part of this community that they maybe did not previously, think about, and what that kind of means at this time, because it's very, very extremely complicated, and we'll talk more about it in our longer episodes because I think it deserves some specialized attention for sure.
Well, I think that is a great place to leave it for today. So thank you for being here. You will hear from us again tomorrow.